Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, mein Damen and Herren, senors and senoritas, comic book fans all around the world, it's time for Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me about what I do for a living, and what I do for a living is I write comic books. And let's get right to the questions. Chris Sandner. Warner Brothers, thankfully not Disney, announced that they've gotten the rights to Alien Legion with hopes of making it into a franchise. Have you been contacted, or would you offer your input if asked? What was it like working on the comic? I really enjoyed your run, and especially your take on Grimrod. Such a great comic and cast of characters. I was always surprised the comic was never brought back. Well, it was awesome working on it. Archie Goodwin suggested me for the book based on my work on Airboy for some reason. I guess Airboy was action-packed and kind of zany. And he thought that I was a good fit for Alien Legion. He talked Carl Potts, the co-creator of Alien Legion, into giving me a try. And I turned out, everybody was happy with my work. Carl was very happy and very generous. I mean, allowing me to play with all his toys without any backseat driving. And Archie, of course, awesome editor. So it was fun. And they teamed me up with Larry Stroman. And Larry and I got along like a house of fire. We just went on a creating frenzy. And all said and done, turns out I was like the go-to guy for all things Alien Legion. Whenever Carl had an idea or got a project lined up, he gives me a call. So we've done it for Epic, we've done it for Titan, and when the movie shows up, I guess Carl will call me to do more comics, and I will say yes. Particularly if I get to work with Larry again, because we had such a good time. It was a lot of energy there, and it was a lot of fun playing with high concept science fiction elements. And I just had a ton of fun and got to add a whole bunch of new characters, which brings me to the movie and what would my input be? Well, in a previous video, I talked about how, if you're not in the Writers Guild, you don't have a say in anything. Even if I was in the Writers Guild, I don't think they would call me. Carl can handle all of that stuff as a co-owner of the property. He's very adept. He's very hands-on. Alien Legion has been so close so many times to being a feature film or TV series. I can't tell you how many screenplays I've read. I assume Carl will send me this new screenplay just to get my thoughts on it. But I've read screenplays by some of the top screenwriters ever. Took a shot at Alien Legion at various budget levels. And why has it? You're asking why isn't the comic been brought back? But why wasn't this made into a movie years ago? It just seems it's one of those things. When I first heard about Alien Legion, I was at a book fair, and Marvel had set up, and there's this poster for Alien Legion, and the Marvel rep explained the concept to me, and I'm like, boy, why didn't I think of that? It's such a elegant, wonderful concept for a science fiction comic book. And I really think, science fiction in the United States in comic form really usually never goes over real big. Think about it. What's the last big sci-fi title that did well here in the United States? And it's hard to think of one. But Alien Legion had legs and lasted because of the terrific characters that Carl and Frank Scirocco created, and the high concept. It's just such a great idea for a military sci-fi adventure comic, and I think it'll be a great movie. And now I didn't create any of the core characters, Tori Montrock or Jugger or Sargar, but I did create a whole bunch of ancillary characters during Larry and my run on the book. So I assume I will have, I won't have any input on the movie, but I assume I will have some participation if you know what I mean. And Carl's a longtime friend, so I know um, he's going to look out for us lowly freelancers. And yeah, I'm glad it's at Warner's rather than Disney, because Warner's seems to be course correcting under Zaslav, and I'm really hoping this is just straight up uh, escapist space opera adventure stuff, and not you know not a 2 hour lecture on in which we learn life lessons. We all just want to shoot them up, right? So here we go. Brick Hard Slab. Is Rippaverse the official name? What's the long-term goal? Just make good comics? That's a pretty good goal. That's a great goal if that's Mr. July's goal. Is there more, though? Are you guys trying to restart comics in a new format? I really enjoyed serial comics as a kid. I guess getting everything wrapped up with a bow all at once is satisfying in a way collecting is not, but it's not the traditional format we grew up with. I need an editor. What I'm trying to ask is there a chance of continuing stories and plans to sell books other than Kickstarter type models? Well, I mean, the usual Kickstarter type model is a standard size comic book, 32 pages at most. What Eric's doing is presenting longer format stories, so you can get more into the universe. It gives us a lot of freedom to explore, and it's a better value for the buyer in the end, because we're able to charge a lower price for a bigger package than if we were to, crowdfund 4 comics. So, I just think it's a better deal all around. I think it's a model that the major comic companies should have moved toward a long time ago, but they didn't do it. Now, the projects vary. I did Alpha Core #1. There will be an Alpha Core #2. Obviously, ISOM is continuing. There's 1 and 2. Eric is working on 3. The Saska sisters are working on their own various series. I've lost count. We had a we had a Zoom call last week, and these two are just generate ideas like there's no tomorrow. The energy is just unbelievable, and they've got this whole long range plan, which ultimately answering your question is yes, we're going to be doing continuing stories that overlap and intertwine with each other and all the rest. You can read each graphic novel separately as a standalone story, but there are elements that will continue on into other books. And the Saskas in particular have a plan for years of comics that tell this huge epic story that the rest of us will all be crossing over with. And so there's lots of plans. The goal is good comics. And I think that should be the goal. There's no grand scheme. We're not thinking about, massive movie franchise, although that would be nice. And, along with continuing series, ISOM, Alpha Core, the Bloodruth, and oh God, why is the name failing me? I forget the name of the female character that the Saskas are working on, and Yaira, alien badass. And then we have Mike Baron coming in to do Gooding. It's going to be a one-shot graphic novel. It's basically that character's origin, and then I'm just assuming Mike will come in with either his own concepts or jump in and do more Gooding, or take some other existing character, and continue with them and do his own series of graphic novels. In addition to that, Joe Bennett and I are doing a brand new character that we created for the universe, and that'll be our follow-up to Alpha Core 1. And then we have another character that we're talking about, and we will be doing Alpha Core 2. So they will be continuing series, but not in the way that you not in the normal monthly, because it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It certainly doesn't work for crowdfunding. It barely works anymore for the comic book stores because the monthlies just don't sell, and the price point on the monthlies is so high now, and they keep there's just so much they can raise prices. Um, the, the level of quality at the big two, in addition to the ridiculous amount of money they want for each comic, has driven away, the majority of the comic book reading audience. They simply either aren't interested in their product or they can't afford it. And we're trying to offer you a package that has value. And we are talking about shorter form comics, but no pamphlets. We're talking about maybe doing some 64-page comics. And this is all an experiment to see what the Rippaverse audience wants. Because first and foremost, that's our concern. What does this audience, this extremely loyal audience, what do they want? And we want to serve them best. So for the future, it's going to be a series of longer form graphic novels, 100 pages or more. And we're looking at, these 64-page specials so that we can keep a publishing schedule going. And so there you have it. And yes, the goal is to make good comics. That's what I'm there for. That's what everyone else is there for. And it's about time somebody got serious about this in a big way. And the reaction's been fantastic. So obviously we're going to continue. It's very encouraging. Hey, if you've never subscribed to the station, please do. This channel, please do. If you've already subscribed, thank you a lot. Hit that button. Doesn't cost you a dime. Brick Hard Slab again. Is AlphaCore all one book, or will there be more? How do I get a PDF since I don't read print so good anymore? Do you and Mr. July have a world building discussion about this on YouTube or anything? That would be awesome to hear the creators talking about how they put it together. I've already answered some of these questions. PDFs, we're going to be in every form eventually, but it's early days. We're feeling our way through. I was talking today. I kind of put Eric together with somebody who might be able to handle a lot of this stuff. Eric's great at that. He's great at looking for opportunities, looking for partnerships. To expand awareness of the universe, expand us into different markets, and all the rest of it. But there will definitely be an AlphaCore 2, in addition to other projects that I'm working on, and it's because I just love working with Joe Bennett. He and I are we're pretty much joined at the hip for a while because we really like working together. As I've said before, you can work with an artist and, you write the script and they draw the story and it pretty much ends there. But I'm lucky over the course of my career that I've found people to work with who are true collaborators. People like Flynn Henry and Graham Nolan and Gary Koepp and most recently Frank Fosco are guys who are they're into it, and they want to contribute creatively. They just don't want to be a pencil monkey. And I love that. I love the give and take and the suggestions. I mean, you like knowing that the guy working on the script really cares and really wants to pour his heart into it. And that's Joe all over. We're just having a fantastic time with the creative freedom that we've been offered. And as far as world building, Eric and I have done a whole bunch of that. Back and forth, just sort of figuring it out. But recently we had a Zoom call with the whole crew except Mike Baron. We had a Zoom call in which we discussed this. How are these different series going to intertwine? What is the world of the Rippaverse look like? What is Flora Spark like? And all that. And it was a great meeting. Like I said, a lot of energy. And we'll be having more of these. Will we have them in front of the public so that the public can see the process? Yeah, I can see where we would eventually do that. But we want to get stuff nailed down. And quite frankly, if you were a fly on the wall at one of these world building or development meetings or summits, it'd be a lot of spoilers. So, we don't want to ruin anything for you, but I'm sure down the road we will be doing a lot of videos looking back at completed projects and how we put it together and how we all work together as we fill in the details of this vast Rippaverse universe, which, trust me, is getting vaster. That's a word. Christopher Cohen. I recall Mike Baron having Frank Castle get involved in several Middle Eastern conflicts during his Punisher run. So I'm interested that if Marvel wasn't as woke and an event like October 7th had occurred during your Moon Knight run, if you would have similarly had Mark Spector somehow get involved in a conflict with Palestinian adjacent terrorists. At this point, I would relish a creative team writing a reaction equivalent to Frank Miller's Holy Terror to shut all these online protests, pro-Palestine loudmouths. Well, yeah, I'm not a big fan of, open anti-Semitism that we're seeing now on college campuses and on the streets of some cities. This is pretty ugly stuff. Thankfully, it's a small crowd, and if you ever see them talk, particularly particularly the white kids in support of this, you realize they'll be protesting about something else next week. They really don't even understand why the hell they're out there, except to wave a flag and a sign and spout hate speech. But as far to answer your question about dealing with current day terrorists, when I was on Moon Knight, I introduced a couple of Irish terrorists and made it quite clear that they were allied with the IRA. They were part of Sinn Féin, the most radical wing of the IRA. And I was quickly told I couldn't do that because Carl Potts gave me a call. He was the editor at the time, and he said that they had let another writer a few years before write the IRA in as bad guys, and Marvel had received a very, very serious bomb threat that the NYPD took very seriously. And so the edict came down, don't do anything about the IRA anymore, because we don't want our comic book company blown up. So I think if I was on Moon Knight, in some alternate universe, if I was on Moon Knight now, that I would not be allowed to touch the current events. I'm surprised I was allowed to get away with the stuff I got away with. And when Baron was writing about Muslim extremists, terrorists in Punisher, that's back when you could do that. You were allowed to do that. Remember back in like Chuck Norris movies and movies like Extreme Prejudice and True Lies, where you were allowed to show Islamic fundamentalists as homicidal maniacs. You're not allowed to do that anymore. At least not in American cinema. In Europe, in Europe and Asia, they're still showing Al Qaeda and ISIS as they are. But for some reason, we're not allowed to do that here because that's too close to the truth. Now, on the subject of shutting up the Palestinian loudmouths, I'm not a fan of that. And I'll tell you why. It's not because I have any love for Hamas. It's certainly not true. It's because I believe in the freedom of speech. And I believe in the power of transparency. I believe in the power of sunshine. If you've got a dumbass, hateful opinion, let's hear it. Let's all hear it. Back in the 1970s and 1980s, there was a group in Philadelphia, and I was living in Philadelphia at the time, and they were called Move. And they were get this, listen to this. They were a Back to Africa group started by a white man. A white guy who changed his name to John Africa and basically started this violent cult in which all the members wanted to move back to Africa. And the thing is, no one was stopping them. If they wanted to move to Africa, if they wanted to move to Albania, everybody in Philadelphia was fine with that, because what these folks would do is they would rent a house and then turn it into a fortress. They would barricade it. They were always heavily armed, and they would turn the neighborhood into like a like a feudal fiefdom of their own. And they would go around threatening shop owners and residents to give them money to support them. And several times the city laid siege to this group, literally laid siege to this group, and one time actually bombed their headquarters. It's the only police department in America that ever, dropped a bomb. And they dropped a bomb on their building, which was supposed to set fire to a wooden bunker they had built on the roof, but it ended up setting fire to the entire building. Now, all across the country and all around the world, MOVE was seen sympathetically, and they were like, "Oh, they have a right to exist, and we need to listen to them and everything else." Well, the problem is nobody was listening to them. In Philadelphia, we got to see them on television shows being interviewed and things like that, and because of that, because we saw them spout their insane manifestos, everybody in Philadelphia realized they're crazy. These people are nuts. And nobody wanted them in their neighborhood. Black, white, or indifferent. You didn't want these people moving into your neighborhood because they would literally take over. And they were paranoid schizophrenics. They're just nutso people with guns. And because we got to see them talk, we realized what they were about. They had no worthy ideals or mission. They weren't worth listening to. They were just violent nut jobs. And that's why I'm in favor of letting people like that talk, because let the Palestinian haters talk. Let the Jew haters, the people that want to kill Israelis, let's hear what they have to say, so that we can identify them and understand that they're out of their minds. Same thing for Ku Klux Klan. In its late days, when it was already losing lots of members, one of the things that hurt the Klan was that in the 80s they were allowed to get on public access cable, and they would have Ku Klux Klan shows on public access cable, and you got to see what morons they were. Which hurt their membership even more. It was embarrassing. I mean, it was like a Second City TV skit come to life, with just a pair of jackasses sitting there, spouting whatever it is the Klan believes in. Where all of our problems are caused by Jews, Catholics, and blacks. So I say, let's hear what you have to say. If you're a hateful lunatic, I'd rather you had a voice than for anybody to assume that perhaps you had a just cause, or to be sympathetic for you when they come throw you in jail. So let's hear it. I want to hear everybody's point of view, so that we know who's who and what's what, if you get my meaning. Now, I'm sure somebody will take this out of context and say, Chuck wants the KKK to be on TV. Yes, but not for the reasons that the KKK wants to be on TV. Okay, Brick Hard Slab. I'm wondering about the Sony Spider-Verse movies. Yes, Spider-Man is probably the most well-known Marvel property, but it's torn in a couple of dozen directions. Sony doesn't really own it the way Warner gets to do with the DC, if I understand the situation. So why try expanding it into a Spider-Verse with Madam Web and all the rest? Why not buy, or I don't know how the business works, but license or whatever, another good or deep superhero property? You have Wild Cards, Mike Grell stuff, Arkhaven, etc. That's not to mention older properties like the ones that Archie Comics used to do. If Disney doesn't already own them, like so much else. So am I missing something, or would they be better served to find a franchise of their own to work with? Yeah, the problem with this is that, Yeah, Columbia doesn't own Spider-Man, which is why they're doing all these derivatives, because there's just so much Spider-Man material apparently that they're allowed to produce, but they can spin off. They're, um, Hollywood contracts are weird. Uh, you know, they'll allow for a remake. They'll allow for a spin-off. They'll allow for this. They'll allow for that. And apparently, the Columbia deal with Spider-Man, signed a long time ago, gives them some sort of free reign, but not completely uh, complete license to do whatever they want with Spider-Man. So, but you got to say that so far with the Spider-Man movies and the Spider-Verse animated movies, they've been successful. They've earned money. They're doing better than the rest of the superhero crowd, and really that's the answer to your question. If I think there's superhero fatigue, real superhero fatigue. I think the superhero movie cycle is over. I think Batman, Superman, Spider-Man will continue on in movies successfully because the characters have so endeared themselves to the movie-going public. And let's face it, the Superman, Batman, Spider-Man got a lot of legs. There's a lot of depth there. Much like James Bond survived the 1960s spy craze, I think Batman, Spider-Man, and Superman will continue on as long as they keep making good movies. And they can, these are franchises that can even survive a couple of bad movies, much like the James Bond series. So, yeah, I think the superhero cycle is over both in the movies and streaming. People have just they've seen all they want. And any cycle ends, but this one was, of course, hastened, and it was a long cycle. Let's face it. This one was kind of hastened by a lack of quality, phoned in stuff like Morbius and the Eternals and the recent Flash movie, and of course the Marvels. Stuff that just the gild's off the lily. They can't keep going this way. So it's over now. And as far as the Spider-Man family goes, I just see it as they're just diluting the brand. I mean, Columbia, they want to do Spider-Man related material so desperately. I mean, they're doing the villains, Venom and Craven and Morbius. And apparently they have the right to do that. But, how successful are those going to be? Although the Craven movie to me looks interesting. So, not sure I answered any of your questions there, but, that's what I know. Terrence James, so you ever saw the meme or saying that Batman with prep time can beat like anything? Well, I am curious, Chuck, would you say that silly saying has some merit? How far do you think Batman coming in prepared can carry him? Without going too deep into NDA territory, would you say you would create a sort of Batman-like character or any of your Rippaverse projects to revive that spirit a bit? I might have coined that silly saying that given the 6 months to prepare, Batman could defeat Galactus. And I really think that's true. I mean, Batman, the heroic aspect of Batman, among all the other things, like courage and dedication and toughness, is the fact that he doesn't have superpowers, that he is a self-made man and a smart guy and very resourceful. And you got to think that, he would be undefeatable as long as he knows what he's up against. And that's what we dealt with in Nightfall was, part of the reason that Bane was able to defeat him is because Batman realized too late what he was up against. And Bane very wisely kept himself in the shadows until Batman was at his very weakest. And he could, get the edge on him. So, yeah, it's kind of built into Batman that he's, the ultimate comic book hero. He's indefatigable. He will, but he's not infallible. He can't just, face off against some superpowered, being from outer space using batarangs. but he would be able to figure out what to do to take down someone like Galactus or the Hulk or whatever. I really believe that. I think that's like the major appeal of the character, is that he's a self-made man. That any of us, if we had $1 billion and the time, could turn into Batman. And I think that's the wish fulfillment fantasy of Batman, that anybody could be him. You can't be Superman because you're not from another planet. You can't be Spider-Man because you weren't bit by a radioactive spider. You can't be Wolverine because you weren't born with mutant healing genes. But you could conceivably be Batman. So, twin spin for Terrence. All right. What is your take on Batman having powers? Related question. Or lack of powers. What I mean is, a lot of people tend to refer to Batman as having no powers and is just a regular guy. But I find that hard to believe at times, because the feats he pulls off sometimes are things that regular humans cannot do. Well, I agree with you that Batman does things, leaping off of buildings and all the rest of it, does things that, would, he wouldn't live long, or he would be severely damaged. Even if he didn't get injured, the wear and tear on Batman's body would have to be extraordinary. But it's a comic book character. Again, wish fulfillment character. So you just kind of got to take it that way. I don't believe Batman is superpowered. I just think he's a really, really tough guy. And, all kinds of things were built into his background, particularly by Denny O'Neil, about his training, how he keeps himself fit, how he keeps himself healthy, and all the rest of it. And, but it's one of those imponderables. It's like, how could anyone have as many adventures as these comic book characters have in a single lifetime? How can these characters be around for 80 years and still be young? Things like that. You just kind of have to suspend your disbelief with Batman, and all the rest of the characters as well. But yeah, no, Batman doesn't have superpowers. He's just able to do the stuff he can do. I mean, as I've explained before, I'm a logistics guy. I like thinking about this stuff, and it did always bother me that him and Robin and Nightwing, they would Batgirl, they would swing from lines. They would just jump off of buildings with these lines that they were holding on to, and it's like, wow, you can only do that so long, and you're going to have all kinds of rotator cuff problems and joint problems and all the rest, because that's a pretty wearing exercise to do multiple times a night for nights on end, weeks on end, years on end. And so when I first got onto Batman, I had heard about these. There was something called D-cell cables, and they were used in the movie Demolition Man. If you remember the opening of Demolition Man, Sly rappels out of a helicopter, and he doesn't rappel in the standard form. He doesn't do the rope drop in a standard way. He has this special cable, and this was real. This was something they discovered and used in the movie, and it works somewhat like a bungee cord, in which the further you fall on this cable, the slower you go. So as you descend from whatever you've jumped off of, the rope takes the tension, and you fall slower and slower and slower. So it has less of an impact, negative impact on your joints and muscles and bone structure. And so that's what I am, So things like that help me make sense of how these characters could do these things, even though they're just human beings. And of course, in the case of Robin, he's Dick Grayson anyway, natural athlete, which helps. Rising Star Comics has a question, but it's more in form of an essay, but I think it's fascinating. He asked, what was the indie comics industry back in the 1980s like? My overall impression is that indie comics back then took comics as a medium seriously compared to today. And the comics back then were meant to be enjoyed first and foremost as comics. Back when you had books like American Flag, TMNT, Gru the Wanderer, Dreadstar, Nexus, DNA Agents, Grimjack, Usagi Yojimbo, and of course Airboy, just to name a few. I feel like the 80s indie scene was, oh, hold on here. What did I do? Okay. I feel like the 80s indie scene was, for the lack of a better term, more wild, wild west than the structured, corporatized indie scene of the direct market today, and is more comparable to the indie scene found on crowdfunding sites like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and other things like the Rippaverse, etc., than anything else. Having worked in it yourself, what would you say the 80s indie comic scene is like? Would you agree with my assessment? And he goes on to say, oh, I messed that up. He talks about how comics were today seem to be written as pitches for movies rather than exploring the comic book form, which I agree with entirely. Yeah, the 80s were different because there was a real energy, a real sense of independence. Comic sales were up across the board, and you had a bunch of startup companies who some of them did very well at the outset and faded after a while as they took their eye off the prize, and then others succeeded because they were nimble and followed the rules of comic book publishing, redundant publishing, and things like that. So yes, Nexus just came out of nowhere and blew everybody away. And you talk about Alan Moore, you can talk about Frank Miller, but for everybody in the industry, this was the high bar. Nexus was the ultimate, the coloring and everything else. Things like Gru and Usagi Yojimbo, which never in a million years been accepted at one of the major comic book publishers, were very welcome and did extraordinarily well in the independent market because there was there was true diversity and there was a larger casual comic book reading public, and this stuff just blew up. American Flag, with its commentaries and socioeconomic stuff, its sort of risque approach to things. It's in your face, trying to be controversial for the sake of parody. Huge hit. Crazy stuff like Reed Fleming, The World's Toughest Milkman, published by Eclipse. These are comics that would never have had a life anywhere else, but in the more closely run, either family-owned or smaller outfit independents who were looking for anything to cut through the noise on the newsstand and the comic stand. Titles like Grimjack had a lot of early success, and of course Ninja Turtles became this enormous phenomenon. I mean, basically, self-published by a couple of guys, and it just blew up into this enormous franchise, still popular to today. But again, it was all about the comics, and as you mentioned, Airboy. But it was all about the comics. It was about exploring the medium. It was total freedom. We didn't have to deal with the comics code. We didn't have to deal with conservation of risk that was plaguing DC and Marvel, and we were able to just go for the fences. And the creative energy was looked upon as an asset, particularly by companies like Eclipse, which published every kind of comic you can imagine. If it sold, if it found an audience, they'd publish it and publish more of it. And it really was about the media. Nobody was thinking about movies or TV or the rest of it. And I agree with you that no one is really doing any kind of experimentation. No one's really honing their storytelling skills. I read some current comics, and you're right, they're so obviously meant to be looked at by Netflix rather than appeal to a reader. They're basically just storyboards. There's no experimenting with page composition, or there's not a lot of cinematic storytelling. And to me, that's why would you produce a well-crafted but kind of dead comic in order to pitch a project? Wouldn't you try to make the best comic book you could? The most engaging, most interesting, comic book you could in order to attract, anybody for ancillary rights like movie or TV or gaming or whatever. Wouldn't you want to produce the best work you could in the medium of your choice rather than just trying to make it look like a movie on paper and failing miserably? Because I see people that they think they're making a good comic and they're not. It doesn't read well. It doesn't look right. They've ignored the rules of comic storytelling, like page turn panels and stuff like that, because they're not concerned with the comic book medium. They're not concerned with establishment shots. They're not concerned with any of that, which they should be, because all of those things are important cinematically when it gets translated to movie and TV. But they just sort of, like I said, they're taking their eye off the ball. And you can't do that. And for guys like me who have never had any interest in the ancillary stuff, never had any interest in the movie and TV. Yeah, if they came with a truckload of money, I'll take it. But that's never what I was going for. I just wanted to be a comic book guy. I just wanted to write comics. This is my medium, and I just wanted to, hone my skills and do my best work in the comic book medium, not think about what might come next or some film executive or producer taking a look at it. So 80s were awesome. 80s were awesome. You could pitch stuff, and if one company said no, you went over to another company and pitched it to them. And there was also more direct involvement with European publishers, which was awesome. And then things like, going down to South America and look for artists. The time I spent going to Buenos Aires. I mean, it's unthinkable today, and it certainly was unthinkable after the 80s, that you could do that you could just go to another country, assemble an art team, come back and pitch and sell the stuff. But, that was what I was doing for the longest time before I got involved with Batman, was teaming up with my Argentinos amigos to just create material that we could sell in the United States and Europe simultaneously, things like that. And that was a blast, because, anything went, any genre you wanted to work in, any idea, it wasn't too crazy to turn into a series. So I miss those days. But what I got to say is I appreciated those days. I knew in that time doing that work that this is special, that I am just a lucky dude to be doing this, because I love comics, and I got to have this outrageous amount of freedom, and someone else was paying the bills. And now that's not to say that I was taking advantage, because I was only ever interested in things that would be commercially successful. And I think I made a lot of money for a lot of these companies, creating this stuff. So, getting to work on things like The Hobbit and Airboy for Eclipse, I know I brought some cash in. I earned my place. So, so creatively, commercially, all the rest of it, it was a great time. It was a great time to be in the business. Hey, if you have questions, suggestions, send them along to brunobookstore@gmail.com. brunobookstore@gmail.com. It is the most reliable way to reach me. You can leave questions here below the video or contact me on Facebook or whatever, but I might miss them. So come along to brunobookstore@gmail.com. And while we're talking about Rippaverse, Alpha Core #1 is still out there. You can still get it. It's going to be up available till January. I did this video a little bit ahead of time, but by this point, you early subscribers, you 20,000 or so of you who bought copies of Alpha Core #1, it's in your hands. You've read it. Let the world know what you think about it. Do us all a favor and support the Rippaverse. I'll have the connection in the video description. Somewhere below, you'll be able to find the connection to go buy your own copy of Alpha Core #1, graphic novel by me and Joe Bennett. And that's it for this episode. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for listening. And I will see all of you, I hope, down the road.